Hello and welcome to this PPR recap and discussion of Modern Horizons with our wonderful guests from the Modern Horizons pre-release. We have Brian David Marshall, Brittany Hamilton, aka MTGNerdGirl, Michael Majors from Wizards of the Coast, and Kenji Egashira, aka Numot the Nummy. And yeah, we're here to talk about Modern Horizons. And Michael, I'd like to start with you because, of course, being from Wizards, you were involved in the creation of Modern Horizons. In what capacity?
So I've actually worked for maybe the longest on Modern Horizons. I was involved. So Mark Rosewater and some other folks we have an innovation week essentially at Wizards of the Coast where we try to come up with new products. And one thing that came out of that week by a small team was kind of the idea of creating a time spiral too. So Time Spiral is like a super beloved set of enfranchised players in the past, but we found that it was just a little too complicated for players trying to get into the game for the first time. It's tons of mechanics, tons of in-jokes, lots of references to old cards. It's kind of a love letter to Magic, but it's not exactly the best place for a first-time player to jump into the game. So lessons learned from Time Spiral. So the idea is, can we create a supplemental product that is Time Spiral 2, essentially, and that's for the enfranchised player. So it's something that a new player isn't going to be drawn to immediately, but anyone who's a longtime fan of Magic, like this is the product for them. So fast forward, the project gets greenlit. We, through design, have various steps in the process: vision design, set design. Vision design is kind of like the where are we going with this? Let's flesh out kind of the scaffolding around the set. Let's talk about like the mechanics, or in the case of Modern Horizons, what is the philosophy of how we're going to dump all these types of mechanics to evoke that feeling of Time Spiral and this callback to this previous experience that players had. So I was involved in that, and then at some point we decided that kind of the draw to this for a lot of players would be the idea of we can create some modern content, some stuff that maybe we are unwilling to do, or for power level reasons aren't interested in putting into standard level sets and having that go through the normal pipeline into modern. And instead, we can just go straight to modern cards. So fleshing out that philosophy was certainly one of the unique challenges of this set, but I was involved in that from vision design to set design, whereas essentially there's a handoff to another group. Adam Perzak was the lead of Modern Horizons and the lead of set design in this case. And then my role, in addition to being in a position on those two teams, was being the lead of the Modern FFL. That's the Future League, so this is something that exists for Standard, where typically play design is developing cards and trying to ensure that the format is healthy and balanced, and there's different places for people to go, and it's a fun and rich experience that's highly replayable. So Modern is a unique challenge because, as I'm sure all of you know, there's tons and tons of different decks, and there's a lot of draws to Modern for different people. People like playing combo decks or aggressive decks or these crazy engine decks. There's tons and tons of possibilities of what you can do, and Modern is frankly a format that's quite fast. There's a lot of pressures on it from a competitive perspective. So coming up with how we're going to put content into this set that is fun for players and going to enrich the experience of playing Modern for lots of different types of players was kind of my job. So it was a really rewarding experience, and I'm very proud of the set, but certainly it was a tough nut to crack.
Let me ask you something. I mean, obviously FFL, it's almost like a meme at this point about R&D not playtesting for Modern, right? Like in the past, right? Like, I mean, it's just something that's out there. What is that like, trying to take your process from standard FFL, which is going to be a much tighter set of decks and possible permutations, to now Modern? How do you throw enough processing power at that?
That was a big part of the challenge. So the team of the FFL specifically was myself, Tom Ross, Dan Musser, and then Adam Perzak.
Oh,
also
that's
contributed
how.
a lot. So yeah, so a lot of awesome, super talented Modern minds, especially coming up through the SG tour, where those players, in particular, and me as well, when I was on the outside playing, got tons and tons of practice playing Modern. And then, like, it's interesting because you can't one-to-one the process because, in the standard Future League, it's lots of unknown information. We're just kind of like creating decks from the card files, whereas in Modern, there's like this established metagame, but there's tons and tons of decks. So, bless Tom and Dan, they were workhorses, just like, making tons and tons of decks. Our running joke is like, when we're trying to create new strategies, it's like, we'll just throw Jund at it. which like is a pretty good litmus test for like, is something competitive. However, it's a weird experience when you're like, all right, I got my new card, I'm trying to see if it's good, and there's like, turn 1, Overgrown Tomb Thoughtseize you, take your new card. It's like, it's like these unpolished brews have a hard time standing up to Thoughtseize Tarmogoyf Liliana the Veil Curves. So
that seems like bad form in the internal testing to be like, I'm going to Thoughtseize that card you're trying to test. And it's like, well, then I concede. Let's start again.
Well, you can't not do that.
Right. So
it's like the bolt the bird, right? You just have to kill it.
So all jokes aside, I mean, that's totally something that happened all the time, and we would just start trolling each other about it, frankly. But like that's where you have to just use your judgment and kind of like draw conclusions and like sort of think about how the games will play out and take lots of shortcuts, because again, like we're a group of 4 people trying to essentially be involved in a format that has 35 decks. So a lot of it's just like discussion and theorizing and like trying to figure out the play patterns and not necessarily brute forcing a bunch of games, but actually just like working backwards through the logic. It's like, well, how would this have impacted this game, et cetera, and also, frankly, like we can't build the decks optimally because we're just such a small group of people, and as soon as anything is introduced to the wild, that's tens and thousands of people trying to break it instantly.
How tough is the expectation of the Magic community? Like, you're 4 people, right, trying to test 30, and it's really like 70 in some cases decks. Like, there's this expectation from the Magic community sometimes, like, how did Wizards not see this? Right? Like, how do you like live in the shadow of that expectation for this process?
How do you live?
It's difficult, and I've taken it hard a couple times where it's just like, oh, I did miss that. And it's just like you try to. It's a combination of, let's try to make sure that we mitigate all the hyper risky things, but at the same time, if we're doing our job well, then we also incorporate tons of safeguards that are going to make the format more healthy if something does get through.
You're mentioning brews, so how much of these new cards are just building entire new strategies as opposed to you guys taking, core decks already in the format for Modern, say Humans or Tron or whatever, and then just kind of fiddling around a few cards?
So a big part of our philosophy was we don't want to add tons of power to existing Tier 1 archetypes. Not to say that we weren't willing to give those types of decks content, but for example, like we're not going to print a human that is stronger than Champion of the Parish for the 1-drop slot for humans, or just something that's like, blatantly going to replace something that exists in a hyper-competitive Tier 1 strategy. On the other hand, like we do want to try to give people options and things they can utilize, and especially if they want to get creative with their deck building. But a big part of our philosophy is like thinking about the poles of the format, so like the hyper-fast combo decks or the super aggressive decks like Affinity or Humans or things along those lines. Like, we want to give those decks options potentially, but we wanted to honestly try to slow Modern down a little bit. You can see this in the Force of Negation cycle. We try to put effort into putting a lot of the power into cards that could be played on potentially turns 3 through 7 of the game, and trying to encourage that type of gameplay. Another good example of this is the Horizon Canopy cycle that exists. Super powerful Magic cards, very exciting. We expect them to go into mini decks, but at the same time, that's not something that encourages winning on turn 3 or turn 4. Obviously, if you play the land on turn 1, you can't sacrifice it. On turn 2, you probably want to do something, impacting the battlefield instead of sacrificing this. So we're talking about like actually utilizing this land to draw a card and gas back up turns 4 through 6, which is something that we would be happy with.
So with the This is something I'm super curious about, because at some point in the design, the conceit was settled upon that every card in Modern Horizons would be new to the Modern format. And that falls under two umbrellas of a brand new card or a reprint that wasn't previously in Modern, because it was it was from before Modern. Those cards, how did you decide which of those cards, which reprints were good or interesting or fun enough to be like, all right, these are now in Modern?
And how did you read my mind when you were doing it?
I mean, some of it is just frankly like what we, the designers, or our perception of the fans, is just like stuff they wanted. Like, I really wanted Unearth in the set. Like, I like that card. Like, I think it adds good things to Modern. Maybe it's not the most powerful card that's going to exist in competitive Modern, but I think it is fun, and it is something that I would really like to see. Fact or Fiction, historically very strong Magic card, especially in Standard, and sometimes it showed up in old extended formats, but with pressures like Jace the Mind Sculptor and other very powerful Planeswalkers and Cryptic Command and all these other types of things that exist for blue decks for CMC or higher. This is just something that longtime fans of Magic will see this and be like, oh, that's really cool. I can play with Fact or Fiction again if I want to, but it's not a big pressure on the format. So it's a combination of trying to please the expectations of players, just put cool new toys that may or may not show up. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that went into it.
I would love to see the original chopping block of cards that were considered and just see like what didn't make the cut, just because I feel like that would be super interesting.
There were many cards that existed already that we did try to play in Modern. And that kind of created some upper bounds for, developing our philosophy of the set that I alluded to previously. But at the end of the day, like the goal behind Modern Horizons is not make Modern less fun.
My favorite chopping block card that Ethan Fleischer tweeted about yesterday was Third Ape. Can you talk about the Third Ape?
Oh man.
This would have been one of the new cards
Is that a
potentially.
Yeah. This is
That references an old card.
I heard about it, but
This
I
might
thought
be
it was fake.
apocryphal.
So there's a card that does exist in Modern Horizons called Llanowar Tribe. That is the name, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Three Llanowar elves stapled together.
Yeah, 3 Llanowar elves stapled together. So
Someone was suggesting you should call it Llanowar Elf,
Yeah.
because the 1/1 is
plural.
already called Llanowar Elves.
Yeah. So this is the example that Ethan was talking about. So it was, instead of GGG 3/3 tap add GGG, it was RRR 3/3
or 3/3.
as long as you control 3 forests. Card name has +3/+6. That would be it. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be it.
Would have been a 6/9 if you
would have been
controlled 3
nice.
forests.
Yeah.
That'd been nice.
With red casting cost, that isn't the easy. Well, I guess
Stomping ground,
stomping ground,
Yeah.
Third Ape. Yeah. All right. But is that real, or is that a joke he was making?
Both.
Okay.
Like, frankly.
Good. Cool.
A real joke.
Yeah, so like for space like that, we wanted to do like some silly references and allusions to old cards and things that would tickle the fancy of enfranchised Magic players, obviously, and we settled on Llanowar Tribe instead.
Where was the line between this is a ridiculous, frankly, a ridiculous pun, because there's some goofy stuff in this set.
Yeah.
Where was the line between like this is perfect for Modern Horizons or that sounds silver bordered? Like that's from an unset.
I think the line is basically like, is this a functional Magic card? Like if I cast it, seriously, it's like if I cast this, like do I feel like I'm playing a normal game of Magic? It's like,
But there are functional.
this is a good example. It's
Yeah,
like,
Lightning Skelemental.
It's like this is silly. Like it's kind of a lightning and a ball lightning stapled together.
But like there are cards with pun names in this set that are functional Magic cards. But there are functional Magic cards in Unstable.
Sure.
Right? I could see someday Last Strike appearing as a black border mechanic, right? You don't have to answer that. It's a third damage step, right? Last Strike was it deals damage after normal combat damage.
I mean,
It's the very slow zombie, because then they had a goblin with triple strike. That doesn't even seem that unusual, right?
I'm not so sure that well, I don't know, but sometimes
I'm just saying, from my end, there's a fine line between. There's some goofy card names like Scale Up. Right. That's just a joke. It's great. I love it, but I'm
Right.
like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, but I mean, again, sort of the conceit of the set is Times Spiral 2, love letter to enfranchised Magic players. So it's like, yeah, we want people to open packs and just laugh and have a good time. Like, Magic is fun. And then hopefully we also give them sweet cards to play with.
What's actually this is a question that could go to everybody, not just from the design perspective. But what's your favorite? What mechanic of the 45 were you the happiest to see?
Oh, that's a good question.
Reappear in Modern Horizons.
Probably haven't even seen all of them.
On the 1 or 2 cards. There's one card with Manifest. There's 2
Dredge.
suspended cards.
I'm not 100% sure what they even all are at this point. At the end of the game with Ben, he played a morph creature pretending as a joke, and I believed it. I was like, it resolves, no problem. So,
Like, of course there's a morph in the set.
Yeah. Manifest is basically morph, right? So
Right, yeah, there's no actual morph, but there is 1 card with
the
Manifest.
white card that gives a creature
Yeah,
manifest.
Soul Strike
Yeah.
Maker. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah. There's, I don't know, there's a lot. Well, okay, of the ones you saw in the games, what are you happy to see back?
I like Flashback, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I also love Flashback, but I don't want to repeat the answer, so I'll say Suspend, which is always just a super fun mechanic to play with, something that I really enjoy in limited formats and have enjoyed in various vintage cubes.
I love that it's the card Throes of Chaos. I really want to see, someday I want to see a judge foil version of this that doesn't have the reminder text.
Yes!
Sure, just 2 words
Just
on
says
it.
Cascade Retrace. Centered in the text box, just 2 lines, right? Because that makes sense as a judge foil too, because this must be so annoying. Okay, let me explain how this all works. Because we're talking about the pre-release, how did that go for everybody getting your hands on these things? Brian, you were saying that there's just cards in here that you love.
So I posted the picture of me opening the spider.
Yeah.
What is it? Rot Pack Widow?
Rot Widow pack.
Rot Widow Pack, sorry. And Sheldon's like, oh, the fix was in. Right? And I'm like, no, it really wasn't. You could see the box get open. It was just like kind of like, all right, well, there's a card that might be a little better in my pack, but there's 0 chance I'm not drafting this card.
Mm-hmm.
And there were tools in there to be able to do all that kind of cool stuff. And even as I sort of figured stuff out, looking back at the draft, replaying it in my head, I could actually just fully indulge in my patterns of play, because I could have splashed a color very easily, and it would have been possible for me to just get to I think it's called Stream of Consciousness, or so basically it's mill 4 for your opponent and shuffle 4 cards of yours. And so if I could have gotten 2 of those into this deck, it's just splash a little blue and Stream of Thought, there it is, yeah. And so I could have had that sort of Gaia's Blessing recursion along with spiders, along with making bear tokens, along with just moving cards through zones, and
all
I
of
would have
Brian's
been
primal
yes,
senses.
yes. It would have been I would have just been in a sensory deprivation tank. Or oh, this wasn't real. This was just an altered state I was in.
But you decided to only do 2 or 3 of your favorite things
I only
in
did,
one
yeah,
deck. Okay.
yeah.
I was watching the replay of the actual draft in the beginning before our first match, and every 10 seconds he was just oh, and he just kept slamming cards, and I was just I'm so dead. I'm absolutely so dead.
And you were saying in the video that we did at the beginning of the PPR, you were saying that while you weren't thrilled with how your deck came together, that you had enjoyed the draft as a draft.
Yeah, the draft was really cool. I like all of the mechanics. I think that there are a lot of different things you can do with the set, which is why I love Limited. That's why I was really quiet during this whole Modern conversation, because for me it's just all about Limited. And sets like this allow me to get a lot of replayability out of the set, and that makes it really important.
I have to ask you though, because you're going to your first
Scared.
Mythic Championship. in Barcelona, and you're going to be playing Modern.
I am. I'm
So-
also in the Super League. That's also
Oh,
Modern.
yeah.
So as soon as I leave here, I'll be grinding Modern like 12 hours a day.
So are you like looking at all these cards and like just going like, oh, okay, I need to think about this, and I want to build with this, and
I would like to say yes. I feel like the correct answer is yes. However, I don't have a good enough grasp yet on the format to have any bearing on like card evaluation.
Turn 3 Tron. Turn 3 Karn. Turn 3 Karn.
Well, Kenji, you've played a lot of Modern.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you make of the set so far? I mean, not just from Limited, because you missed the draft.
Right. Well, actually, no. That's the best part. I've gotten to play with the cards and yet not had the ability to draft it yet. So I still get to live the best of both worlds. So I mean, I get to go draft it eventually, but I've already played with the cards. So it feels like a win-win still. But from Modern, and everybody's been talking about this, there just seem like so many different cards that are going to find homes, maybe in new archetypes, but like, I think it was Scale Up you were talking about. Is it the one that creature gets turns into a 6/4 or whatever?
Yeah, so it's a single green mana, turns one of your creatures into a 6/4,
Right.
but for the
Overload,
for the cost of a Crawworm, you can overload it and make
Sure.
all your creatures Crawworms.
Yeah, but so that has applications in like Infect, for example, which is no longer like a tier 1 deck, but it's something
Tom
that's
Ross's hand can be seen over the set.
But you can immediately put your imagination to that Inkmoth Nexus, Scale Up, I'll hit you for 6 Infect in the air or something, something like that. And then you have like the Dredge card that kills artifacts, right? Some like
Shenanigans.
Yeah, shenanigans.
It's literally called Shenanigans.
And Dredge
That's
like
the gold border thing, right?
Yeah.
That should be. If a card name is called
It's
Shenanigans,
called
it needs to be in
Shenanigans.
the board, like gold.
Absolutely.
So good.
I love that the
Silver
art is
border.
just destroying a lantern.
It is, yeah. It's again one of those throwbacks, for franchise players you were talking about. Just a lot of nice callbacks. I'm excited to see what it's going to have an effect in Modern. There are just too many cards to even comprehend how it's going to change. I mean, maybe it doesn't change all that much. Maybe all the tier 1 decks like Dredge, they just add a copy of Shenanigans or whatever to their sideboard, or a couple in the main deck or whatever. Then the Humans gets that blue-white changeling. I don't remember what it does exactly, but it of course it's a human, so it fills that role. But we'll see.
Do you think, speaking of the changelings, do you think there's any, and not just for you, but for anybody, is there any of sort of tribal synergies in existing Modern decks that you think are going to be like, oh, this changeling suddenly is in this deck now?
I mean, just the human predominantly, I think. But then, you have goblins and stuff too, right? Like Goblin Matron, that was one of the powerhouses back in the day of goblins, when you could still do, what was it, Goblin Recruiter? That card was busted beyond him. Yeah, Goblin Lackey, stuff like that. And I guess Lackey and Recruiter are long gone now, right? Is Lackey still in? No.
Yeah, but you can still do like Fecundity Goblins. So like the Matron will get you a Skirk Prospector, which then turns your
Sack it,
Mog
draw
War
a
Marshal
card,
into
yeah.
like a Black Lotus and
Draw 3.
a Draw 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns it into Black Lotus and Ancestral. It's pretty insane, actually.
Yeah, so
I mean, you certainly destroyed me with goblins.
I didn't even draft the deck. So
In two different and no less impressive ways. Turns out there's just you matroned for a different goblin each time.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so
I had a question for Michael. About,
Yeah.
You're talking about testing Modern. How much, like, at some point, like, we've seen so much, like, turnover in top decks for Modern over the last, like, 2 years. Like, how much are you able to aim at things in Modern versus just, like, creating good tools because Modern's going to change? I have to imagine that there are cards in this set that your expectations of have just changed by virtue of what's at the top of the standings in Modern now as opposed to 18 months ago.
Certainly. A lot of it's just making educated guesses and, hoping that, we are able to create a bunch of different types of cards that could exist in different archetypes. As I spoke to previously, like, it was kind of a conscious goal not to add to some specific types of strategies. So some of the really powerful cards in the set, stuff like Seasoned Pyromancer and Ranger Captain of Eos that are, what I hope are really exciting to Modern players are kinds of cards that could theoretically exist in different types of strategies. Seasoned Pyromancer obviously was something that, looked like it could go in old Mardu decks that existed a little while back, but now maybe they'll go into Arclight Phoenix strategies, or people will find different ways to put this into even a Dredge deck potentially if they're looking to build that a little differently. So we didn't want to put a lot of power into 1 and 2 mana cards. Instead try to, again, as I spoke to previously, kind of not necessarily slow the format down, but encourage players to play longer games. So, if they're willing to even change their tier 1 strategies to incorporate these different types of cards and maybe play Modern a little bit differently, like that's super exciting.
I actually have a question about that. So when building a set, like especially like this one for Modern, which has such a deep card pool, how do you guys develop the set? Is it like you build a shell and then you make cards that will fit into the shell? Because you have to consider how that set will be played in Limited.
Right.
So I imagine that's a really difficult balancing act. Is it a shell and then you build the cards, or do you build cards that you want for Modern and then build a shell around it so it's balanced? If that makes sense.
It does. And that's a tough question to answer, frankly. So both set design, which is what Adam was leading and also I was taking part in, one of their primary goals is dealing with Limited specifically, while simultaneously the Future League for Modern was running that I was also on. So, and at the same time, there might be contradicting goals between the two teams where we both need to make sure that Limited is fun, but also create cool constructed cards that people are going to be excited to open and to own. So, it's some working together, some negotiation, some making trade-offs that sometimes occur within the set skeleton. But I guess backing up to your kind of your original question, vision design hands off a file that goes to set design, and then at that point we start actually kind of fine-tuning the set now that we have archetypes and start trying to figure out the payoffs for different types of archetypes and making sure that they function properly, and then slowly through iteration and internal playtests just coming to something that we're proud of.
So it's a limited shell first?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most important format, so that's reasonable.
I think everyone here agrees with you.
I agree. So then, last thing, I want to know if I know that you might not have yet had an opportunity to see every card in the set, but did anyone have a sort of a favorite deep cut reference from this love letter to enfranchised players? Michael, you probably have the most knowledge of the set. What's your favorite person?
Maybe I'm the least prepared to answer this question.
What do you mean by deep cut?
Well, just like a reference from it could be a card or flavor text or art, or just it's this thing from that other thing, right? As Paul just brought up, Umezawa's charm, and there's Umezawa got the Jite there.
Squirrels.
The hermit.
Just squirrels in general.
Yeah, the deranged hermit.
The
update.
something hermit.
Yes.
The vanishing hermit.
Deep Forest Hermit. There it is. Yeah, with vanishing. Right. Sorry. Yeah, vanishing hermit. Right. It's a hermit with vanishing. Vanishing is back. Holy moly! I forgot about that.
Is that the only card with vanishing?
I
hope so. Probably.
There were 2 more, but they're gone now.
When I was very small, I tried to make a squirrel deck. So this was aw.
That's really good.
It had flavor value 11 out of 10.
I like that we finally get to see Pashalik Mons, even though he completely destroyed me in the PPR. But as referenced on Mons Goblin Raiders in Alpha, and now you get to actually see this Goblin leader.
Is that the first time we've got the first name Pashalik? Has that ever been referenced?
Yeah, the name's been referenced on
Pashalik has
in the flavor text. Yeah,
I know. Mons
is that an
has.
anagram for anything? Because I know Mons is
an
actual
employee
person.
of the coast, right?
But I was just curious if Pashalik had any.
I don't know. Honestly.
I don't think so.
There's a lot of words in Magic history that if you unjumble them, they are someone's name or
Feldergriff.
reference something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was curious if that had something to do with Mons.
I honestly don't know.
Maybe it's yeah. There you go. In the flavor text for Mons Goblin Raiders, Pashalik Mons and his raiders are the thunderhead that leads in the storm. It says, and that's the flavor text for Pashalik.
There you go.
The thunderhead that leads the storm. So
I need better glasses.
Yeah.
You can read that?
I can't read that.
Barely.
He just has it memorized.
There's some black smudges, but wow.
Speaking of bears, I guess that's my actual answer to your question. I think
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
My phone wouldn't stop going off when Ayula was
no specific joke, but or even deep reference, but just Mother Bear, Ayula, and then the bear seismic assault.
I don't know what it is about bears, but I know that people were asking for a bear commander for years, and then Goreclaw was made, and everyone was like, "That's awesome," but
Not
she's a
quite there.
4/3 and not
Sure.
really.
Not
so
a purist.
it was a very sort of like, give us what we want. Okay, no, not like that. Right. But now with Ayula,
Goldilocks metagaming.
yeah, exactly.
This one's too big.
Yeah, I love Ayula. I think she's amazing. So yeah, thank you for that. From me, thank you. Even though I had to pass her in the draft because I wasn't in green.
Yep, that was a goal of Ethan Fleischer from the beginning, was make sure we make this legendary bear. So
Yeah, because I read his article because a lot of people were like, "Why didn't you get to spoil this?" And I'm like, "No, hang on. We just have made a couple jokes about the Bear Commander deck in some of our videos over the years. And sure, it's a meme for us, but I read Ethan's article, and this was also very personal to him to get this in there. I deep respect for making this happen. So yeah, I think that's awesome.
and I definitely want to give a shout out to him. He was the lead of vision design for Modern Horizons, and a lot of the work into the jokes and the legends that ended up in the set, and kind of that skeleton that progressed into set design was
The skeleton that's on fire, or
I think that actually was a card that he originally had in the file as well. So
it's terrific. Well, awesome.
I think my deep cut is probably just having slivers and changelings in a limited environment together.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite a gag or anything, but it's just something that I've always kind of, you always want. You're like, I want more slivers, but you don't want the set to be just overwhelmingly slivers. There's something that you have to just, like, you can fill in your curve, and you can get a couple more pieces for what you want to do. But I'm really excited to get more opportunities to draft and do a sliver deck. The least salty I've ever been losing a game of Magic, a match of Magic, when I lost to Adam, and he's just like flying over with his flying, +2 first striking, hasty slivers, and I'm like, yes, kill me, kill me.
That's the best thing about limited, is you get these like really cool interactions, and like it happens all the time on stream where I die to like the double Liliana deck, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Whereas like in constructed, I'm like, oh, you've done that 30 times today. Good job.
Definitely, you reminded me that one of my favorite old school references is the card that mentions cowards.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like an incinerate that makes cowards.
Something.
Makes a creature
Yeah.
not
Pyro,
makes a creature a
Pyrophobia or
coward
something.
that can't block or something. Anyway, the point is, cowards can't block warriors. There we go. Cowards can't block this turn. So all your changelings can't block. Just for added value, why not? Oh, and it's Norn the Wary. Of course. Right. Right. It all makes sense. Multiple references.
All coming together.
Anyway, thank you, everyone, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts on Modern Horizons, and thank you for joining us. This video has been brought to you by Wizards of the Coast, and we really appreciate it. And
You.
yes, you did this in more ways than one. And thank you for watching, and there'll be another piece of bonus content forthcoming on the channel this week, as Kenji and I are going to do a deck build. Well, Kenji's going to do a deck build, and I'm going to watch. And I think our guests are going to be joining us on Tap Tap Concede this week, which might have gone up before or after this video. I'm not entirely sure. But the point is, thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.